Spirit is revealing to us the best way to hold our community safely and respectfully. So, the cornerstones are our agreements with one another to mark the boundaries of our conversation so we can gather mindfully in mutual respect and harmony. In this space, you may hear new ideas. It's safe to step outside of your comfort zone and to consider new ideas before automatically rejecting them because they're different from what you have experienced or heard before. Open your heart to participate fully. Take a deep breath and join the party of learning and sharing our way to wholeness with plants. And remember, participation looks different for everyone, so we are not here to judge other people's methods of participation as long as they are not disruptive to our gathering. Number 3 is to use I statements. Practice self-focus. Pay attention to what you are feeling and what you are thinking. And in addition to that, we will come to being conscious of your activities on others and your statements on others. So you want to be conscious of how others may hear your statements. However, remember, you are not responsible for their feelings. Number 4 is, it is okay to disagree. It's a necessary part of accepting differences. We do not blame, shame, attack, or discount ourselves or others in this space. Remember that this can happen on a verbal or a nonverbal level. And I want to add that in this space, for people who haven't necessarily practiced these skills very much or very often, this is a safe place to practice all of these skills with one another. So if we stumble and we make a mistake, we realize we may have, inadvertently bumped into one of these cornerstones, this is a safe space to step back from that and to own it. In other words, there's no crucifixion here for making mistakes. You have to learn sometime and somewhere, and this is a safe space for that. Take care of yourself. Breaks for water, self-care, and to interact with those around you are part of the process of being human. We are not here to imitate models of control and oppression where you can't get up except for 5 minutes to go breathe because someone gave you permission to. That's not what we do here. When you do get up to take care of yourself, we do ask that you mute yourself and stop your video before stepping away. And that is for your privacy, ours as well, and for whomever is presenting, not to be, of course, interrupted if your audio is open and there's things happening in your area of living. Number 7 is to gently reflect on your assumptions. Ask questions of yourself and others before jumping to conclusions. And if you are unable to mute yourself because it's part of a presentation, feel free to ask your questions in chat, and I'll be definitely glad to get that to the attention of the presenter or to answer or, make sure your question is answered. No question will go unacknowledged. And number 8, these sessions are being recorded and shared widely. Please be mindful that what you say may be heard by a much wider audience than the people present today, and please proceed accordingly. That is the end of the reading of our cornerstones.
Thank you, Mary. And just so you know, your audio is a little hard to hear, but I just wanted to give you the tech feedback, but I think everyone was able to hear enough. And then also, if y'all need to read through them again, all the cornerstones that Mary just talked about are already written in the beginning of the comments. So we ask that everyone coming in agree to those to be a part of these free skill shares.
Yes, if you agree to the cornerstones, please type I agree. Thank you, Nicole.
Oh,
Please type I agree in the chat, please, if you agree to the cornerstones. Thank you very much. There won't be a link, Sue. I'm going to put them all in the chat room again. They've all been put in chat, and I'm going to repost them. Thank you for everyone who typed agree. Thank you. Okay, and I'll be putting them in again. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Mary. Should we introduce ourselves? Since you're already started out, do you want to talk for a minute about who you are and why we're doing this?
Sure. I have taken my video away so my audio can be a little more stable. Can you hear me better now, Nicole?
I think so. What do y'all think? Was it worth her taking the video off, or is there any feedback from people, Grizz?
I didn't see a difference.
Okay, so I'm gonna make that happen. And
Okay.
Thank you for people who've been working with me on technical stuff.
We're
Okay.
all doing.
Here we are. This should be a lot better. Okay. So I am Mary Ayodele. I'm a prophetess in the Better Covenant Cherubim and Seraphim Church, an indigenous African church based in Edo State, Nigeria, and we, of course, are here in the United States as well. Prior to that, I was inducted in several traditional societies in West and Central Africa. I work in my community as a root woman, essentially. I work with plants and other elements that were put here on the planet to help us stay sane and whole and balanced on the planet. So plants are an integral part of what I work with. However, we work with them from a spiritual perspective first. So everything for us begins in the spirit world and it manifests on the physical. And that definitely informs how we approach plants. I'm here today because it's important that people not just feel better, but people get skills that they can use the rest of their lives, from my perspective, that can inform them and their communities, so that when they face any crisis, it does not matter what is in the news today, because there will always be something in the news tomorrow that is upsetting to somebody. But we have to become spiritually resilient, or as I like to say, you got to build your spiritual immune system. So I'm here because I believe in the work that the other two presenters are putting into the world and what they have stepped forth to do. And I believe that everyone should be at the table, including people of color and people of different abilities and classes, and all sorts of differences should be available to step into this circle. And I represent various communities that are usually not in circles of self-care. Most of the communities I'm in are in circles of survival at all times. And it's important that we understand that we need to build our spiritual immune systems to face whatever comes our way, no matter what it is. And the skill sets that are being shared over the next 5 weeks, including this Sunday, are a vital part of our spiritual and physical and emotional and mental toolbox that we can reach into. Even when this current crisis has abated, we still need these skills. So thank you, Nicole, and thank you, Greta, for inviting me to be a part of this circle. And I want to welcome someone else I see who stepped into the circle. Carla's here, and there's probably other people here that I know, and I just can't see your names, and I will welcome you all. It's good to see you again, and thank you for taking time out to make this a reality.
Thank you. Greta, do you want to talk about yourself?
No, of course not. I've been involved with nonviolent direct action struggles for over 30 years, and cut my teeth doing first aid medical support for the Earth First movement and forest defenders, and then branched into causes for social and environmental justice as well. I bottom lined the medical clinic, the first aid clinic at the Convergence Space during the WTO protests when we shut down Seattle, and that's really where I was forced to stretch myself into new territories and using herbs in a first aid sense to counter the effects of chemical weapons. So that's my primary interest that I'm bringing here to this forum, and I'm excited to talk about how to use herbs in a first aid sense.
Awesome. I'm Nicole, and I'm an herbalist, and I feel and Grizz and Mary are also really close friends of mine, and it's really great to be able to work with them in this realm. A lot of us are missing each other, so every time I get to see their face, I kind of do this for selfish reasons, that I see a lot of people on here that I recognize, and it kind of makes me happy from a deep place to know that y'all are here with me on Sunday morning on Zoom. But yeah, we definitely, I'm an herbalist. I've been working on the streets for many years, and I actually have not been on the streets during this recent pandemic version of direct action. I'm about to set up a aftercare clinic with some herbalists though, and so we're going to be we've gone through several different videos, and we're going to be collecting them all up on some different places. One of them will be off our Wildflower School website for free. They'll be off YouTube for free. There's going to be different places, but we really wanted to do this because we wanted to give people some sort of, available context to work from if you're going to be out on the streets supporting different actions, which are probably going to keep coming. If anyone, there's going to be more. There's going to be more and more and more, and lots of surprises from what it looks like. So we wanted to offer you some hope, some inspiration, some ways to move forward. And I think, I want to just start with one of the things that keeps coming up and that we're going to kind of move into first. That is a sticky subject, which is one reason I wanted to have this extra room. But I really wanted to go there and I think we're going to bring it up every week, but the only way I knew how to put it in a succinct way, and I have been educating folks and working as an herbalist for half of my life now or longer. And one thing that keeps coming up is just systemic racism and white supremacy. And I really wanted to bring that into the conversation. I know it's Sunday morning, but I wanted to bring that into the conversation. And one of the ways I put it, I know the only way I knew how to put it is how to try not to be an asshole as a white person. I'm coming from my experience. And then I wanted to kind of discuss ways, that I work on things and maybe some strategies that could be helpful, but also maybe talk about some things that we could do as a community to make sure that systemic racism isn't seen on the streets with herbalists too, because that can be really disconcerting when there's all these other things going on and people are trying to do these actions for civil rights and civil. I'm sorry, I just woke up. And against racism, anti-racist work. And so I wanted to start there, and I know it's a sticky place, but maybe I'll hand it over now to my other folks that are here to move forward with that concept.
How not to be an asshole.
Yeah.
The 10 steps to good allyships. How to talk about white fragility without talking about it directly to the people who seem to have it. All the intersecting oppressions, and how do we want to open up that discussion. How do we come to the front line? How do we come to the table with our offering and be in a humble way in service of the plants and in service of the people? I think that's a really important piece to always be mindful of. Mary, your video is still off, by the way. Her audio is off also.
Yes, I lost because it's better for me to be heard, you know, for my technical challenges over here. I'm better with my video being off. But I'm here, I'm listening. Yay.
Great.
Okay, so do you, I guess what I'm gonna start with is maybe what has come up this week on the streets, and we are gonna get into herbs. We're gonna talk about a lot of herbs and a lot of ways to work with them, but I wanted to kind of see if anyone had any input about what they'd seen. I know as somebody who's been working on my own internalized racism and sexism and homophobia and all of these things, it wasn't something that I could just turn on. I couldn't just say I've read a book or I've done the work and then suddenly I was okay. It was something that I'm constantly working on in my life, and I think that's the biggest thing when people get kind of excited to go into the streets and to participate in something like this. I think the first thing is to really, and I'm reading a new book for me. It's the Me and White Supremacy workbook. And, you know, she was saying some of the most important things is to work on yourself first, right? So I think all of us, if we really are dedicated to social change, and those of us that are white, we really need to combat this every day. And this is something that, or not combat, I don't like that word. We need to explore and get uncomfortable about the exploration, perhaps regularly, because this is something that has always been there and it's gonna keep coming up over and over. And most recently this week, I saw a situation where the Wall of Moms in Portland, where I happen to be right now, was called out as being racist at the protests. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many things going on. And now we have to worry about internalized racism and street medicing and all of this stuff, right? So I think that for me, I wanted to hear if anyone had any feedback on that, seeing this in the streets, and if they had anything they were working on. I know for me, one of the weird things right now is I'm talking about it, and I like to, one of the first things I try to do as a white person is listen and not talk, and here I am talking. And I think that one of the first things that I would say on the streets is that we need to take a step back as white people and not always be the ones to try to fix things or be in charge. And so I want to start there and open this up a little bit so that I'm not just talking.
And yet you are leading this discussion.
I know.
So
I know.
we keep moving forward in the interest of time because we want to talk about wild oats today.
Yes, we are. But I did want to just put that out there if anybody wants to get uncomfortable for a second and talk about this and talk about their own issues. Silence. Mary, do you have anything to say to what I just said, or do you think you just want to listen?
Yes, I'm looking at chat, and there is someone named Bella who typed into chat who said, I've heard some people complain about the protest in Portland because there's no Black people there. That I've heard that come about in the Black community. The story, I mean, I'm not in Portland, I'm in the Gulf of Mexico bioregion of Houston, Texas. However, you know, social media and all that, and even before social media, people can communicate with one another. And one of the prevailing themes that is interesting to me is that the current protests, not just in Portland, because protests are going on in some other places too, have left the conversation of police brutality and have moved on to address other concerns. And that some people in the Black community feel like the Black focused concern has not been solved or addressed fully. And what I'm going to do is take it upon myself to find people who are presenting that discussion, who are putting it forth, because I'm sure they don't mean that every protest has to be about police brutality, because there's intersectionality is the new fancy word, right, of how everything fits together. So I'm sure that no one thinks some protests will solve police brutality, and what I want to do is to get more well informed on that perspective, because I've heard that too, that there was a joke, which really isn't a joke, that happened last night at a gathering I was a part of, that said a cemetery, it's a true story, a cemetery was defaced with the slogan Black Lives Matter. And I understood that Black Twitter went nuts saying, well, Black people don't go to cemeteries and spray paint things. And that may sound like a stereotype, but I can assure you I'm a Black person, and we definitely don't go to cemeteries to deface gravestones as a habit of resistance or self-expression or anger. That's culturally taboo, generally speaking. So there is that concern that the current protests, and the other thing is that the media isn't really telling us what the current protests are about. They're just trying to make everyone look rabid and crazy and out of control to justify, possibly lethal force. So that's kind of where I am on the current protest and the comments I'm hearing from the communities I am a part of. So Bella, yes, I've heard that there aren't many Black people out because those protests are not necessarily focused on the concerns of the Black community.
Well, and I can speak to Portland too it's 97% white. So I mean, in there's something like that, or not 97. I think there's 3%, is one of the Black leaders in Portland was saying it's a 3% Black city. So first of all, there's not a lot of diversity to begin with, because this was a very racist, this whole area was Oregon, what they call Oregon, was developed in a very racist context. So that's another thing that you can do as a white person, is learn the true history of a place and why things have become the way they are, and why you don't see a lot of people of color. Like, why is it? I came from a place that had a lot of people of color, and then I came into a very white area, and it was very starkly different. And I was like, what happened here? What's going on? And you have to do your research, and you have to do your work to understand why things are the way they are. They didn't just magically appear with a bunch of white people up here in Oregon, it was constructed that way on purpose. So, but there is actually on Twitter, you'll see that that there's a lot of POC protesters that are saying, no, this is good, what's happening in Portland, I'm here on the streets. But then the media is saying another thing, and then there's this argument back and forth. So I don't know, because I'm not on the streets right now. I'm too nervous about the pandemic. so that's where I'm at. I'm doing aftercare in a full hazmat suit if necessary. But that would be, my only feedback about that is that it is a white city. So
Definitely, Nicole. I lived in the Pacific Northwest 18 years, and those are the kind of things that either people are not getting the full understanding of, who are feeling there's a lack of representation. And being a Black woman all my life, I've often said there's some places we don't want to be represented at. Not that a protest is one of them, but I remember in the 80s, it was this big movement to get more Black people in horror movies. And I thought, why? What's the point? I mean, who wants to be in The Exorcist? So sometimes the enemy, whoever you may see the enemy as, or if you don't want to think of enemies, the undesirable forces that seek to divert us from fulfilling our destinies in a positive way, they'll take one piece of a narrative and then subvert it, you know. And I think the narrative of the lack of representation is easily subverted by people who want to do that to get, you know, a lot of people benefit from the fight. They don't benefit from the peace. There's a lot of money to be made in personal, community, and cultural wars. So it's not always selling bullets. Forgive that imagery. It's sometimes just sowing the seeds of distrust and mistrust, because together we can do a lot more than we can sitting in our silos angry. So I think you're right. And people who don't understand, if we're talking about Portland, Oregon or Portland, Maine, and, you know, there's such a dearth of information. A lot of people don't have the geography together. They don't know where it is. And then the media can serve as a distortive filter for all this. So that's why I'm going to educate myself to get some voices in my ear of people who have a solid statement. It doesn't matter for me, like the Cornerstone say, if I disagree with their statement, I would like it more filled out so I can hear the whole thing, because I don't think we're hearing it. The Pacific North Oregon was set up as a white Christian territory or state, and excluded even the Black folks who had traveled with them all the way over there from the East. So there's a lot of history that people don't know, which really informs their pain right now, and not just with Portland, in my opinion.
And one thing that we were going to move into before we get to herbs is allyship and how to be a good ally. And I wondered if anyone, and this is a discussion, this doesn't have to be just the presenters here, but I wanted to know if there's any input that people have about being a good ally, about, or how not to be, or how to support them better as a BIPOC person. No. So Bella says, it feels like Black people are saying, don't protest on our behalf, which I get, but the Curia, I don't know what that is affecting all of us. So it makes sense that white people want to be a part of this movement too.
I want to say something. Hi, it's Mary. I wish I can come up on camera, but then you can't hear me that well. Okay, check it out. I think that and this is going to be something I have to practice too, that whatever we're hearing, it's not the views of all Black people. There are some Black people who are thinking that our current president is a very good president and they want him to come back because they think that he's helping everybody tremendously better than anyone else on the planet. So I think Black people are definitely not homogenous in political views and what is wanted. And it's easy to think that from the way the information is presented to us. And I have to capture my own language and not talk about white people or rich people or men or whatever it is, even other Black people, like there's this big blanket of agreement. However, there can be some commonalities, some threads we can find. And in light of that, I think any conscious, rooted, well-balanced Black person, and I'm using that term very broadly without having time to dig into it, and I mean someone who's doing their own self-work on internalized self-hatred and internalized classism and patriarchy, and if they're doing that work and don't even call it that, they're just exposing themselves and working on tolerance and openness and cultural healing from cultural trauma, would say that we understand no battle is won alone. Like, I don't think all Black people do not want white people fighting on our behalf or protesting, because that doesn't make sense. We're all in this pot together. So I think that there are voices that aren't getting a lot of media attention because the sensational attention of calling in troops and, you know, the dramatic idea that some marginal groups want of a civil war is playing up to the masses while people are already frightened. So my point is we're looking at fear porn. And outside of looking at fear pornography, I know that allyship is a vital, meaningful, and important part of the journey for mainstream and non-mainstream people of color, generally speaking. Yes, there are separatists, yes, in any group, but they're not out. There's more to say. So I'm going to stop because we only allowed so much time to this. But I also want to say this is a really important conversation because it's easy for us to live the way capitalism wants us to, where you go buy a herb or you plant it and you pull it up and then you help some people. And that's beautiful, right? But there's all this other stuff that goes with that. You know, I mean, we can even have a whole talk about what it means to pull something into your garden and grow it there instead of allowing it to be where it was and meeting it in the wild. And is that a form of plant oppression or plant, well, maybe not oppression, but you get where I'm going. So there's a lot of things we can look at when we work with plants. And I just want to say that the cornerstones may have come through a little jumbled through the chat, and maybe you couldn't hear me, but they're there to create a safe space for you to share things like Bella's sharing in chat. And you can chat them out too. You can type them out. You can talk about some things that may be dancing in your head that you really don't know where to say them out loud. This could be your place if those thoughts are dancing around in relationship to how to work with helping to heal yourself and your community and your planet that you're on. So I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
I'll add a little something in there too. You know, just within the notion of how to help communities of color. I think what we bring to the table as healers, as people with the plants, as street medics, however we are bringing our support forward, the basic tenet needs to always be centered around the do no harm protocol. And that's what we teach in our street medic trainings and our wilderness first responder trainings all the time. And, you know, people coming to the front lines to help support it, nonviolent protest, direct actions, whatever, natural disasters, it's all about spreading calm and quelling rumors. And if that is just the set of words that's always brought forward, spread calm, quell rumors, mind your do no harm protocol, I think that really helps keep newcomers centered, and it does seem to continually be white male, older white male men who come forward with this, you know, unexpressed or unresolved white privilege, white supremacy. They don't even know they're walking with it. And in my experience, that's been the section of people that need to be supported the most with reminding them of these important protocols, and to not come rushing in, you know, white knight in shining armor crap to help the people kind of thing. So if we're always just humble and walking with the plants and bringing their messages forward to assist on the front lines, I think that that's how we can stay centered on that.
Yeah, and I did have one thing to add to that is that just from practical experience, the place I've been asked to be a part of a lot of clinics and places where I was one of the only white people. And one of the reasons I was asked was because, well, first of all, one of the things is I was asked. I didn't put myself into a position that said, I'm going to help. I actually was asked by people to do something and I responded. So I think as one thing I'm going to just kind of throw out there from my perspective is that you don't always have to go throwing yourself into a situation as a white person unless it feels right. And that and one of the ways to tune into that is to see, was I asked? Have I checked in with myself about my privilege? Sometimes you're asked and it's still not appropriate. It's just not appropriate to be there, especially as somebody who is seen on by the media perhaps as being the center of attention. So I've been a protester in many different scenarios too, but as far as like where you fit, you have to really kind of step back and remember to always be of service and to wait to be asked. You don't have to just jump in to everything. So humbleness, be humble. Don't think that you're the center of it all and that you know best. So with that, we're going to get into some herbs, y'all. What are y'all thinking?
Excuse me, I want to read something Carla put in the chat. Sorry to interrupt everybody.
Yes.
Carla put a great comment in chat. It says, I do think that the critical mass is important so that media and cities can't easily dismiss the social disobedience and actions, including folks with more privilege, putting themselves between people of color, particularly Black people and the police. But it continues to be important to not make the story to be about the heroism, quote unquote, of white people, and to keep the focus centered on BIPOC voices and leadership. Thank you, Carla.
That was great. So we have this other section, y'all. We're going to talk about creating pods. Do y'all remember that? Because we were talking about how in the old days of activist organizing, it was all in person, and that we were getting together in real life, and we would form these trusting relationships with small groups of people. And I think it's much harder sometimes to do it in this online environment. We're kind of forced to be here now, but did anyone have anything to say about pods? Forming little pods of trusted herbalists? Nothing? Anyone have any experiences with a pod? None? Aha. Somebody at Bella. Okay, so a pod, Greta, do you want to talk about pods, or Mary? Mary, do you want to talk about pods?
I'm going to defer to Greta. I'm going to say quickly, my first pod was when I was in graduate school in Berkeley, Oakland. I was going to Holy Names a little over 15 years ago, and I stumbled into a pod, didn't know what a pod was, but recognized, I want to say this for people online with us now who may be in different communities, that a pod is a group of people you trust, that you work with well around a particular issue or action. And I was in a pod and didn't know it, but we just didn't call it a pod. So as a woman of color, I find that when terms come up that I'm unfamiliar with, once I get the definition, I usually have a familiarity with it if it's a righteous action, because I'm usually active in some sort of revolutionary or resistance movement, if I know it or not, right? Just by being Black and alive in America is a resistance movement, and not being crazy and on drugs or so forth. Okay, I branched off there. So a pod is when I went into a Botanical in Oakland, or Berkeley, I'm sorry, and met with a Ia, that's a leader of like a spiritual group in Orisha. And anyway, I was already in a pod. I was living in Seattle. I was traveling to Oakland for college for my graduate degree, and she introduced me to what she called a cell, C-E-L-L, without the negative connotation, you know, prison or anything, but a group of cells that would be no more than 3 people. In her estimation, you can have a pod of 4 or 5 people will tell you the ideal number, but you work together in harmony. Like me, Greta, and Nicole, girl, I'm gonna forget your name. We're right here, right? Okay, I'm sorry. It is Sunday in a beautiful way. I'm looking at the sun. We're working as a pod to put this together today, and Carla's a part of our pod too. So 4 of us are here today. I'm sorry. Me, Carla, Nicole, and Greta. We work together in harmony, and we put something together that's meaningful and uplifting to our communities, and you're a part of that today. Okay, give it to Greta now.
For me, another important piece of this, of being of service and, amassing a small collective of people that you know and trust that you can run with. I'll just use the model of, running as medics on the street, since I think that's something that a lot of folks have come here interested in empowering themselves with more knowledge and skills for that. I think that the affinity group model that's used has been used in the United States in the nonviolent direct action model for some decades now. You've got, 6, 7, 8 people tops that you really, more than 6 or 7 people, there starts to become more security issues, as far as like, it's just hard to trust that number of people. So we're looking at like a small family group essentially. And so within that, even if you're totally focused on the medic piece and providing first aid to people, there's still going to be one person that you're going to want to make sure can kind of hold down the food piece. So that I would always direct someone to be like, okay, you're going to be the one who's in charge of making sure that we get fed. You're either going to be the person who spends a bunch of time making power snacks for us to put into our jump kits, or you're going to make sure that we have hot meal when we come back from being in the streets all day, or you're going to be running with extra water. So that person is kind of in charge of food and extra water for the medics themselves. Then there's always needs to be someone who's in charge of logistics, who needs to be savvy with things like communication devices or just communication in general, and knows the other people involved in the other disciplines in the action or protest movement that can handle holding the threads of, complex levels of information on an ongoing basis, things rapidly evolving, things changing and moving quickly. And that person can also be the security person, someone who's in charge of knowing where people's house keys are, knowing where their car keys are, knowing all of the ins and outs of how to stay safe on the streets. That could be just in a small pod of medics running together. That could be someone who's in charge of watching the back end, watching the flank, make sure that you don't get kettled by the police. That's just a simple lookout, so that when 2 medics are down on the street supporting someone, that person is looking out for other dangers that might be circling around. And then there should always be one person who's holding down media, and that could combine with a person who's also holding down legal. And that person is just simply in charge of any media releases that need to go out. If the medic team wants to present information about what it is they're doing, like if you're holding down a clinic at a large convergence space, for example, it's really important to be reaching out to the media. And it could also be a supply train. That's like a really nice way to reach out to the local community or a broader community and say, hey, we're getting really short on these kinds of supplies. We need more of this. And so the media and legal person could potentially be the same person, but obviously as you get into larger and larger events, you need to divide those up. And then finally, I always really feel it's important to leave a spot for a spiritual guide of sorts, someone that can like hold down the energetics and the spiritual aspect of the work that we're doing. Maybe it's as simple as holding space for the plants, making sure that the apothecary stays clean. That could be like a kitchen sweeper kind of person. They're doing the energetic sweeping at the end of the night if you have a space like a base clinic kind of a situation, or just someone who is really grounded and thoughtful and can really, really hold that spreading no calm and quelling all rumors role. So that's my 2 cents for affinity groups in the action model, and how they can, just so you can think about it in this big way and then think about it in this small way, and be like really clear with the people that you're going to run with, because you all have to have each other's back.
And, you know, one thing about that I've seen a lot happening is that people are going down to the protests by themselves. I highly, highly recommend not doing that. There is too much volatile energy and too much going on. You need to go down with a buddy. That has always been the street medic trainings that I've done. I mean, if you're going, and I'm talking about even if you're not a street medic, going down to protests when the federal government has people out there that are just grabbing people off the streets. How are people going to know if something happened to you if you don't have somebody with you that can say what happened? So have that buddy with you, and don't go if you don't have a buddy. And that's hard, right? But it's, that's my opinion, and what I practice. And also don't, and one thing I keep seeing done, I'm going to say again, don't put all the medic gear in one space. Please make sure if you're part of a medic pod or allyship of some, you know, if you're running a clinic, that you have little bags of stuff in different areas. I managed to convince people at Occupy in Austin that it was going to happen, that the medic gear was going to get taken at some point. They didn't believe me, and then it did, but we had managed to siphon off half of it and even just kind of shove it into the bushes just in case. And sure enough, it was targeted. And people always get up in arms that this has happened, but it happens every time. So not every time, a lot of times. But just think about those things, being more dispersed and not so centered as a medic or as an herbalist, and also having really trusted groups of people that you can work with. And that takes starting to build trust in more than just, hey, do you want to be in my pod? It's about forming trusted relationships. So that's my 2 cents. So I think next we have a mystery herb. Oh, we weren't supposed to tell them what we were talking about. It was going to be a mystery.
They have to guess what herb we're talking about.
Right. I forgot. Okay. Well, that's okay.
That's okay. Did we already say what we were going to talk about? Did we blow that?
Yes. Someone mentioned it. Someone definitely mentioned it. I heard it.
I did. I spilled the beans.
That's okay. That's okay. It's good beans. We'll pick them up and grow them. Great.
So we thought today would be a good day for wild oats and to talk about all of the things that we love about wild oats. And every week we're going to have a mystery herb that we kind of go in depth about, but then we're going to kind of veer off. We've decided on different herbs too and how we love them. And y'all might have your own ways that you use wild oats. So please do put them in the comments, because we love to hear from other people too. Does anyone want to start? No? Yes?
Well, I like to use wild oats a lot for supporting the nervous system. That's kind of how I learned to use it from Michael Moore, its primary use. It's so easy to grow and cultivate. The seeds are really burly and can be kept in your pocket and dispersed in all sorts of vacant lots and roadsides if you want to start your own little patches here and there. But it's so valuable as a cover crop for protecting the winter soils. So I've managed to just grow a lot of it my own. I live in Northern California, and our hills are just covered with the wild variety of Avena sativa. And I always try to pick the oat tops when their little bellies are, when I squeeze the little belly of the flowering top, it squirts out some little white juice. And that's really what I want to capture when I'm making my medicine. And I'll put that into a tincture, usually 75%. Sometimes I'll make glycerates, of course. Really awesome to have a stash of both. but I have just found it to be really effective for kind of cutting the head off from the body in a way. It soothes the nerves in a almost like the nerve endings, the dendrites get soothed with this milky sap, almost like a soothing quality that you can feel within a couple of hours easily.
Let's just look at it. I'm going to put up a picture just because it makes me happy. Whoa! Can y'all see it?
Wow, that's a beauty.
Yeah, that one's ready.
Yeah.
That was one in Texas, I think, that I had.
Leaves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So have anyone else used or want to talk about wild oats? Because it's one of my favorites. Well, I have a lot of favorites, so I shouldn't say that. Yes. So milking in your garden right now. It's kind of sexy to say that. What I remember Michael saying about it is, oh yeah, you could pick some. So with as far as wild oats goes, Michael would say if they're ready, they'll come when you squeeze them. And I know it's really crude to say that, but in some ways you won't forget that either, that pushing on their little seed heads is gonna get them to squirt. So that means they're ready for harvest. So that's one way to know it. And it's a really easy plant to grow. I had a friend who was able to get her whole backyard, and she didn't want to mow. So she's like, I should just sow it with wild oats so I don't have to mow and I have a good thing to do in the spring. So she sowed the whole backyard with wild oats and then gave it to all the herbalists when they wanted to, have a good space to harvest. So that's a really nice one instead of grass, because it is a grass. It does do a good job of competing well with things like Bermuda grass. So you can start to get it to be the dominant, depending on where you live, because Carla's probably sitting there going, no, she's in Arizona. So it's definitely not something. Have you ever gotten it to grow in Arizona, Carla?
I have not personally grown it, but I do know some people who are, but mostly in their gardens where they can have more control of it.
Right. So does this is something that's commonly traded though. And the thing is, I would really suggest is not getting this just as a commercial kind of thing, because so many herbalists across country have this as a weed in their area and would be it would be easy for them to trade this. And one of the things, if you wanted to start building relationships that were more authentic and real, besides just, Facebook, whatever, is to start trading with herbalists and talking to them and getting to know them through your trades. And you can tell a lot about somebody by the plants you receive from them. Actually, that's a fun way to get. Oh, look, Heather brought some to the table. Heather, show us. Look at that. Yes.
I know, and I'm not sure if I can get close enough to my computer to like squeeze it for people to see, but
let me try to make you the focus right now, just because oh, look at this.
Yeah, I plucked these off, and these aren't wild oats. I actually grew, they are not wild that I found them in the wild. I grew them in my garden, but they are still oats. So we'll see if if you can see the milk when I squeeze it, because you can feel it pop. I felt it pop, but you can't see it. Also, I don't have my glasses on. Probably do that.
Oh my God, I'm so happy.
You all didn't get to see it, but I felt it. So anyway, when you squeeze them, you can like feel this little pop. You can feel a little pop, and then the milk spares out.
Yes.
But anyway, so here they are.
Thank you.
Super easy to grow, like a great crop. And this is my second crop. I've got 2 more coming. I just got kind of a late start this year, so I did a succession planting. But anybody needs oats and you're in Eugene.
Thank you so much. I don't know how to unpin you. You might, oh wait, here it is. There we go. So, you know, Margie Flint, who I should have gotten to come on here, she taught me one of my favorite ways of using wild oats. And there's this word tropho-restorative. I love it because it's such a big word. But it just means bringing to balance, right? It's not, it's just a really fancy way of saying that it's going to restore something to balance. So wild oats is this tropho-restorative, and it's full of micronutrients. So it really just rebuilds that, you know, nervous system with those micronutrients. But Margie saw me, you know, doing my infusion, and she's like, why are you infusing them? And I was like, really? Because I was just using the grass in an infusion. And she goes, oh no, you need to decoct those, right? And I had never, this was about a decade ago, and I had never thought about decocting wild oats. I don't know why. It just hadn't really been the way I was taught it. So she did this rolling simmer of wild oats for about 2 hours and kept it going. And I've never gone back. It was the most delicious thing I have ever taken. It's like butter. It turns the wild oats into this buttery kind of exploration of deliciousness. So when you put nut milk with it, because you can then put like even some nut milk in, that's like, or oat milk in, and then you have this butter and oat milk kind of concoction. It's so delicious. So yeah, so oat grass decoction is, all of you, once you try it, if you haven't tried, has anyone had it here compared to infusion? Heather, do you like it better too? I feel like it's like total delicious, totally
You can tell
different.
you get more out of it. You know, you're actually getting all the goodness out of the oats that way.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that a couple years ago too, and it's changed the way I do it now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really good ally to have on the front line, because so many people are smoking, like really good for people recovering from smoking cigarettes. And it's great hobo medicine. I've always used it for train hoppers and the strung out activist who's just been hopping from one action to the next, the really stressed out organizer whose adrenal system is borderline fried. That's always been my go-to. To give them a big bottle of oat glycerate, maybe mixed with a little bit of blue vervain or some, lousewort, if muscle relaxers, peticularis, things like that. Hypericum, it mixes really well with hypericum, mixes great with catnip and skullcap. And I really like it with hypericum for activists.
Is it for mood or just in general for activists and with hypericum?
I think it's more just for the adrenal burnout, like just the go, 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 always being on the go. And that's an area where I've tended to specialize my works in supporting people who are in organizing roles. I've decided that that's where I can be the most supportive, because I really understand that whole activist adrenal burnout from the back end, having been I'm a third generation wilderness activist and saw my mother burn out. And so I've learned a lot about how to help people pace themselves in this work, myself included.
Mary, do you have anything about wild oats that you love?
I was just trying to type it in chat, so thank you for saving me from all those keywords. I was saying that I have experienced it in its Ethiopian variety as part of a main dish after people had undergone like strenuous spiritual activity. So there are some activities in the non-Western faces of Christianity, like the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which is Christian but very different than what we see over here. And there are certain spiritual, what would you call it, activities that people undergo voluntarily. And when they're coming back from that activity to the rest of us, think of it as like a seclusion, but with a lot of other parts to it. there's this dish that they serve. I've never undergone the seclusion because I've never been a part of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. However, the food that is served afterwards is my interaction with oats and how they're used in Northeast Africa, and they are prevalent in Nigeria too. But anyway, there's this dish that is made that's a dinner dish, which is different from what we think of over here as, like a breakfast porridge and stuff. But anyway, this dish is served, and it's clear from the plant people involved in the serving of it and the making of it, it was presented to me as this helps them to rejoin us. It helps them to reintegrate their nervous system into the regular world because they've been out of it in what we may think of as a trance or meta consciousness or astral travel, whatever we're calling it over here. They haven't been engaging with, doing laundry and going shopping and all that. So coming back to this world is a bit bumpy. It can be. And they really like to make this dish. And it's a big deal and it's delicious. And that's when I first figured out it was a different perspective on oats. And of course, over here in America, I am very familiar with oat straw. So I do more work with oat straw very sparingly when I help people get together. There's a veteran I work with from the Iraqi war, and he, has moments of PTSD. And oat straw, just saying the word and him looking it up and feeling, he's so comfortable with that. Other things I thought would be a good idea were not good for him. But something about the plant makes him, it's like his ally, but he wouldn't groove with that if I told him that. But it's his ally. So oat straw has proven to be very helpful in my experience with men in his situation. He's not the only one I work with. And I've introduced the idea of oat straw to them and given them some of it in 3 different ways I use it. And it's been very, very accessible, helpful, and recognizable. It doesn't seem so foreign and unusual and scary to some people who've already been frightened. So that's my experience.
I love that. I love it. So it's the idea of transitioning from like more of a spiritual, transitions in general, I could see this being really helpful for. And I think I wanted to clarify too, like the oat grass is what you see on the market most of the time, and it's very affordable, very cheap. The oat seed heads in milky stage can also be gotten, and those tend to be thought of as being more potent. And so the idea would be that you could use the grass on a daily basis, but then those oat seed heads are going to be more of a nervine component. And one of the big things about this plant that makes it so great, and so many herbalists use it regularly, I think the world would be a better place with everybody drinking a little bit of this, right? But it's like it's something that is tasty. And so a lot of people, will make these teas or these tinctures and they taste really strong. And so this is something that people can drink as a tea and it's agreeable. And so even non-herbalists can have this as a base. And one thing that Greta's done that I always thought was so smart at a base camp or at a clinic is have this base tea. She usually would use, I think, and Greta, you can tell me this is wrong, but it was a red clover base. But this would also, for burnout or preventing burnout, having a oatgrass tea as a base to give other tinctures in would be a nice idea at, say, a clinic setup that you have to support the Black Lives Matter protests or whatever else is going on. So we need this. And one thing I was going to show folks, if you're making a tincture, I actually do mine in lower alcohol, Greta, believe it or not. I do mine. I've been getting into really low alcohol as long as it stays good, but I do mine in like 50% with fresh milky oats, but one of the ways you know that the milky oats are really good is that it shouldn't be clear. Like this one I've kind of shaken up and you'll see that it's very milky looking, like there's a latex. I'm sorry if you can't see it that well. But it should, when it sits, you'll see that the latex kind of falls to the bottom and there's actually a layer of the milkiness that you shake up before use. And that kind of is something that I've seen when making the tincture. A good tincture will separate, I think. That's, of course, it's all debatable, but if you're making tincture, that's more, going to be a little bit easier, but in the pandemic, it's going to be a lot harder to distribute tinctures safely, I think, so you're going to have new protocols in place, which probably should be something that we also discuss in that. In our upcoming is like protocols for safety when you're trying to distribute out medicine or remedies to people. Anyone else have an interesting use with oats? I use mine mainly for nervous system support as well, but I call it for crispy critter syndrome. Like if somebody's just fried for whatever reason and they're the kind of person that if you tap them on the shoulder behind them, they just jump automatically because they're so used to whatever. So I think that, I don't even know where I got that term, it's probably Michael or something, but we have somebody, Pandora has a use that they say, I use oat straw in most of my teas, especially nutritive teas. I make a syrup from the decoction. I love that. With milky oats and honey, stabilized in 15% alcohol. Oh, that sounds absolutely amazing. And I'm going to have to try that. I love that. Yes, a syrup is good, especially in some communities where there's still alcohol in it, but you could definitely do it with just, yeah. So then we got some comments here and we can see, meadow foam honey. What is meadow foam honey? Okay, I'm getting excited. Just anyway, y'all can keep going. There's all these comments about it. Yeah, the deer in the headlights. Think about that. The deer in the headlights is who does well with this remedy. And I love that, I love this idea of it as a food that Mary talked about. And I love the idea of using it, in a vinegar. Does it come, I guess because the minerals will come out. I'm wondering if anyone knows how the latex does in vinegar. Because I know the minerals will come out in the vinegar. I'm wondering if the nervine components that are thought of, but anyway, that's chemistry. Anyone else want to speak? And you can take yourself off mute. This is a discussion. No? Oh, Carla, you want to say that, Carla?
Yeah, I was just gonna see if anybody had either had experience with this, but it seems like with the vinegar, maybe it would be a good experiment to do the decoction first and then a maceration in vinegar afterwards to get the latex and the mineral.
I love that. I have all these things to play with now. Thank you, y'all. Meadow foam. Okay. Oh, meadow foam. Yes. Okay, I know what you're talking about.
So this is a great herb to help people detoxing from speed or drug use. And like I mentioned, nicotine use. I've even seen it be very helpful for coming down off of caffeine addictions. So, we see these things in the streets on the front lines. It's really helpful to be supportive. And because it's so relatively inexpensive to find, cheap to grow, doesn't require, it's not a heavy input with water. You don't have to amend your soils. It's a pretty easy commodity to trade and find. I feel really good about advising people to use high quantities of it. It's not hard to come by. It stores well, especially if it's harvested and dried at proper moments.
Nice. Tree, did you want to say anything about your vinegar?
I put it all in the blender. I had this high-powered blender, and I whirred it all up together, and it's waiting on the shelf to be squeezed. So I'll report back on how wonderful it turned out after I squeeze it.
Was it fresh?
Yeah. Milky. Yeah.
So just to reiterate, this is such a good central nervous system tonic. We really have no equivalent prescription drug for this herb, and it really will shut the brain up for a minute. So that's that circular thinking that can get going when people are entering into that moment of fear and panic, those states of PTSD where the brain is looping. You can safely give, up to 3, maybe 4 dropperfuls of this tincture or glycerate, and it has a really high value in that regard as a stress medicine for also use it for nervous exhaustion for normally strong people, just that sympathetic adrenal burnout, or if people have been overusing their sympathomimetics like coffee, caffeine, boosters to get themselves revved up. Buffers the body from the brain, basically.
Yep. Do we want to talk a little bit before we go? We have like 15 minutes. Do we want to kind of branch into other nervines that people might want to explore with it a little bit more, like as far as if you're going to do combinations, what to do for what, and if people have certain situations they want to bring up that have come up from, several months of being in a pandemic, protesting, putting your life into these crazy situations that we've all, kind of found ourselves in. Is there any sort of, any sort of herbs we want to bring up that go along with what, because you did mention, Greta, a few that you felt like were helpful. Do we want to go in that direction? No? Anyone? Mary?
Oh, Mary's here dealing with chat and looking at these great ideas with oats. So for other nervines, I'm really excited about what I've learned that I can experiment with.
Oop, we lost you. Hello. We lost her.
Can you hear me? Oh no.
Yes.
Have we lost
Yes.
So I hadn't moved in that direction. I'm really excited about what we're doing today with milky oats and all the possibilities.
Yeah. I mean, with me, I usually put skullcap with it as a nerve tonic. That's a really nice one that combines well with it. And commercial skullcap is a nice one because it's not too bitter. But if you get into some of the local varieties of skullcap, it's not as intense. Hops is a nice one too. Hops is skullcap I like because it does the calm focus kind of thing. Like it calms it down, but you still feel like you can really move ahead and be focused. Hops for me, I get a little bit more of the sudorific or hypnotic kind of thing going on, but it would be good more for antispasmodic also. So then Tulsi, yes. You want to talk about that, Carla?
Yeah, so I love Tulsi because it grows really well in the desert. So I
Ooh.
have a big batch in my backyard. Um, and it's both a tonic for the lungs and the nervous system. So it seems particularly appropriate right now. So, and I like to use it for the anxiety inducing asthma circle. So, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, bath bag. That's a great idea, Sue. If you're not open to internal medicine, or if you're just not sure, if some of you are maybe newer to some using herbs a lot, the ones we're talking about are pretty. They call them grass, generally recognized as safe. But there's not really too many. The only one that we've mentioned that might have more things is the hypericum, but that's not in whole plant form. A lot of times people are taking massive amounts of hypericum and then they wonder about certain side effects from it, like you do burn more easily, things like that. And I don't have a lot of experience with St. John's because I always lived in the South where it won't grow. It's so funny. Like now I'm starting to get to know it, but and Tulsi is delicious, and for sure. Anyone else have anything they like to do with the oatgrass that's a good combination?
Well, I like to blend it with a nutritive tea that has nettles. I mean, the tea is basically a solid relaxant, mostly because of the high calcium in the oat straw leaf and seed heads. So adding it into a nutritive tea blend for daily tonification of the nervous system and relaxing, I think is really beneficial. So that could be, lemon balm and nettles. It has a great flavor, so it mixes well with a lot of those herbs that we think of as our nutritive tea herbs. So I like to make an overnight infusion. I advise people to, use a 1/2 gallon mason jar, put a couple of big handfuls in the bottom of the tea blend, and then pour boiling water over that in the sink, of course, so your jar doesn't break. Make sure that you modify it so it doesn't get too hot too fast, and let that steam and strain it, and that can be drunk at room temperature throughout the next day. You can add some fruit juice or sparkling water to it later in the afternoon for a nice afternoon pick-me-up. And if that is done on a regular basis, 3, 4, 7 times a week, you really start to see some benefit of resilience and stamina several months later. You don't really see the effects until 3 to 6 months, especially if you're helping someone with recuperation, or if you're coming out of a pattern of high stress. I would love to have more herbalists supporting people in organizing roles and protesting roles with large quantities of tea infusions that were just made freely available. I could see them being rolled around on bicycle trailers and dispensed freely and easily. Houseless people really benefit from a strong tea like this with some nettles and good strong nutritive skullcap and Tulsi in that blend as well. It tastes great, so I found high patient compliance because it is so mild and great tasting. Horsetail also in there, excellent. Gotu Kola is another really great one that you can add into that kind of a tea blend. Goes really well with oat straw. It's such a good connective tissue tonic and a brain and memory tonic. I love Gotu Kola. It can be grown as a house plant. You can put 3 pots hanging together and the plant will grow. It makes a mat where it grows naturally, so they'll hang down and reroot in the next pot, and then grow down and reroot in the next pot, and then you can just trim it with scissors. That's a really easy way to harvest your own Gotu Kola that you can grow quite easily. What else? Yeah, that's it for me.
Oh, I love that somebody brought up cow poppy, especially when you brought up addiction. Cow poppy, the oats with cow poppy, oh my gosh, such a great combo. You know, Sue Sierra Lupe, who probably would be on here, except she's running a frontline clinic for unhoused COVID, like a COVID clinic. Now, but she taught me about cow poppy and lavender for addiction. She's one of her primary go-tos, but oatgrass with the cow poppy, also really wonderful combination for any kind of coming off addictive substances. And one of the things, Greta, that you brought up that's really important to note is when you're out on the streets, a lot of people have forgotten their medications, or they've been out there so long their medications are starting to, or whatever they use, they've run out of. And so there's a lot of that starts to bring things. They're dehydrated most of the time. They're, you know, they're tired. They've gotten sun exposure, a lot of these protests. So think in terms of, if you're going out to the streets with Nervines, tea is going to be really important, or getting people things that are going to hydrate and cool. But I love this cow poppy too. That's such a great, takes the edge off, you know, in a really safe way. Anything else people want to bring up? We have a few more minutes, and we don't have to keep going with herbs, but if anyone feels like Margaret, yes, Margaret Nee's on here, y'all, and she does Girl Zines a Go-Go and has a bunch of like a zine collection down in San Diego that has a ton of herbal stuff. So you should definitely look her stuff up, and you should definitely do a zine, Margaret. Yes, yes. And
Carla, just seeing your comment, I think that's why we chose milky oats, because we had a conversation, Mary and Nikki and I, about what is the herb that's coming to the surface, coming to the forefront for us right now in these times, not only these pandemic times, but this time of great unrest in this country and the climate change we're facing, and looking at the doctrine of signatures of this plant, the way the seeds kind of come off of the stalk and these big, fat, broad, stout leaves at the bottom. There's a lot there for us just in the shape of that plant and the little spiky seed heads. I like to really meditate on the shape of that plant and how she can be of support to us right now. And that's exactly why we chose this plant as like a good herb for pandemic times, people being isolated, their nervous systems, there's a lot of stress and being amplified.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And, you know, I think that, or Mary, did you have anything to add? Because I don't know.
Oh, no, just that we're at the end of our time together, and I really do see a zine too, because there's some recipes that flew through, ideas that flew through chat that I hope we can pick up and bounce with. And I hope it's okay that I offer the opportunity for all of us who come back together again, if we want to do a little show and tell at the end or at some point in our other gatherings of the beautiful things we've created, or with this information. I would personally enjoy seeing that. So I hope we can carve some time out to share with each other and build community that way too. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. And, you know, one thing I'm hoping, and I really love that Greta said, is that maybe everyone that's here, if you feel inclined to come join us on Sunday mornings, I think it'd be great if we did plant sits in between with the plants that we talked about, and see if anything else comes through. And me and Mary and Greta have been talking a lot about plants that just seem to keep coming up. Like we've had the vervain just kept coming up, and yarrow just kept coming up. So anyone that wild lettuce, anyone that wants to do that, I think that would be a fun activity to start doing a little bit of plant sets and just sharing anything that came through at the beginning of our next meeting, or any other plants that came up from us talking today, or recipes. If you want to share this sort of thing, I will be creating this online like free course so that we can keep track of everything, because it's just like a wait, and then you can put it in the discussions there, and I'll be sharing that. So just be looking on our Herbalism is Resistance page, and thank you so much for everyone joining us on Sunday morning.
I just wanted to pop on here and say thank you to everybody and show my face. It was really great. I was glad I remembered it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
And if anyone has, one thing I do want to say, if anyone has ideas about technology in these rooms, please do give me advice after this, and you can email me at the Herbalism is Resistance as far as putting up a BIPOC only space, because I'd really like to be able to offer that. And I'm having technology issues with it. Anyone else that wanted to say anything, please go ahead.
Give thanks to the green people.
Thank you. All right, I think we're there.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Be
Thank you.
strong,
Kisses.
be connected.
Be good. See you next Tuesday. Yes, stay strong, connected, and healthy. Love you guys.
Love
Yes,
y'all.
I love that. Yes, be good.
Power.
Bye.